Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between, welcome to the Incomplete Skeptic. You've tuned into the series, and I welcome you. And I would like to point out that every voice that can impact the world should be heard. The Incomplete Skeptic seeks to free minds from self-imposed maelstorms. Our primary purpose is opening minds and hearts in balance to help shift consciousness into universality. Some of us are seemingly looking for a workaround on conventional thinking until we no longer have a box to think outside of. That's my paradigm. We need to at least be respectfully questioning our own convictions. It's important to have the courage of our convictions, but it's imperative, I think, to have the courage to question our convictions. That's what the Incomplete Skeptic is about, working to make the world a better place than what we found it, peacefully and intelligently, with great respect for every point of view. This is paramount. We may not be all on the same boat, but we are on the same ship. Today's guest is Darryl Schoon, a fellow passenger on our Mothership, whose synchronistical guarantees, that's a mouthful there, produced his most recent book, Docking at the, guess what, Mothership. Notes on going home. Welcome, Darryl. Thanks for being on the Incomplete Skeptic.
Thanks for having me, Timothy.
Certainly my privilege. So, I am seeing what's going on in your room there, and it seems like, what is that painting over your right shoulder? I don't know if you have your screen reversed or not.
This one.
Yeah.
In fact, I'll bring it up, and I won't be able to see what you're seeing, but you'll probably be able to see it better than if I move it towards it.
Okay.
Is this it? Can you see this?
Yes.
Here?
Yes, I can.
This is an oil done by one of Martha's boyfriends when she was in college. And he was a Native American, and some of his art made it to the Smithsonian.
Wow.
It's extraordinary. As I told you before, he later died from injuries suffered on the Pine Ridge Reservation when he was attacked by the goons, local federal goon squad. He was part of the American Indian movement, AIM, and he paid for trying to be free. But anyway, that's the piece of work he gave her when she was in college. I'll show you this one. This one is done by an extraordinary artist. And I find it amazing because it was of the Buddha with his eyes open, and Buddha's eyes are always seen as closed, which I'll show you with Martha's sculptures. But she did this. All the symbolism is there, but the artist was Pat Aiken. But it's probably her most extraordinary piece. I wasn't intending to bring this over here.
Yeah, keep your mouth by the mic. I can hear you really good then. If you can.
Can you see this here?
Yes.
That's her greatest. It's a collage called My Trail.
I can barely hear you though.
Collage called My Trail. Amazing. Now over here is some of Martha's sculptures that you saw before.
Oh wow. Nice.
Yeah. So close together. Oh no, jeez. But here's messing around.
Well, I'd like to know the history on all these. It'd be great. I mean, we'd be here for another hour just talking about the history of the art itself. I think I'm going to have to. Does she have a website with her work that?
No, in fact, she does. She only did it for a period of time. Now that she has to take care of our C60 business, the time is out. This is a sculpture done by Pat Aiken, the other artist who did the Maitreya. It's called The Ship of Fools, and it was started out as a painting, which we have the original of. And Pat said, "I'm doing this painting, and this title's coming through, but I don't like it. It's a bit, I don't like the name."
and we said, did I lose you or the screen?
No, we're here. I have a gallery screen here where you're on one side, I'm on the other.
Okay.
Are you not seeing me?
Yeah, I'm not seeing you now. I just sat it down and I don't know what I should do here.
Do you have your do you have it on speaker or view for speaker or gallery?
It's there's no, it just says Zoom. I'm back to the, well, Martha says the window underneath. There it is. I can see it. Now we're here. Okay.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And-
thought if
and-
we were side by side, that way.
No, it
people
works.
Could,
Yeah. Now
okay, cool.
now I can see us. But the sculpture, she was doing this painting and she said, the words are, I don't like the title. And she said, I said, what is it? And she said, Ship of Fools. And I said, Pat, that's what we call our friends. And we have ever since the Haight-Ashbury, we call our closest friends the Ship of Fools because we're fools. It was
So
clear.
she was channeling something, I guess.
Yeah, and she did, to her, it was sort of pejorative what was coming through. And we ended up with her original painting and the sculpture that she did of it. So it was meant for us.
Interesting. My bio mom, not too many people say that, and
Yeah.
so my bio mom had a boyfriend who had done some time in prison, and we were taken away from, my brother and I were taken away from her at quite a young age, and they deemed us the worst case of child abuse they'd seen in the state of Minnesota at the time, and I'm not bragging or anything because
Yeah, because, oh well.
yeah, because like nowadays it's like, yeah, that was in, this is now. But it still might qualify as not so good. She'd tie us in cribs, and that was my first prison, was my crib, and she'd tie pieces of sheet around each wrist and hold me in the crib and my legs and stuff.
Jeez.
And sometimes I'd get out, sometimes I wouldn't. But she had a boyfriend who had done time, and he was robbing stores and stuff, and showed me his gun and a bag full of money underneath the floor in our apartment and stuff. And she said, don't tell your mother,
Yeah.
And
Don't tell your mom.
and then and he handed me the gun, and I've got this I remember this heavy gun. I could barely hold it, and it was pinned against my chest just trying to hold it. It was so heavy, and he was giving me this gleeful look, like, and I thought, wow, that's a really dark look, and I'm talking about, and the kid, kids can kind of see things.
They can see things.
But he was very skilled too, though, and he had art. He was quite the artist, and he had art hanging in the Minnesota State Capitol.
Wow.
And when we quit drinking and drugging, it kind of, we removed the barriers to our shine.
Wow.
And I think real sunshine comes from the inside out, but sometimes what life does to us, you talk about rising above the maelstrom. That's partly why I put it in the introduction. What life did to me, at least, I can't speak for everyone, but I think we're more like than not. And is all the things that happen in my life were like a fire, or like and fire, oftentimes when there's depending on what's being burned, it leaves a soot on everything.
Yeah.
And it, the fires of my life had covered my heart with this black soot.
Yeah.
And when I was in the dark night of the soul, an angel hit my heart, and he had like this, I saw this hand, and it had like a diamond cutter. It was like a glass cutter, but it was a diamond cutter.
Yeah.
And he struck my heart. And when he hit my heart broke open. And it took a spiritual being to be able to do this. And when my heart broke open, my heart was black.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when it broke open, this white light above the light of the sun just burst out from my heart, and it just shone, and then my heart pressed back together, and I could see it's like I'm seeing a lightning over my shoulder here. So it's like the light was so bright on the inside of my heart, but the outside My heart wasn't black. My heart was just covered with soot,
Covered.
right?
Very good.
You know,
Good
and if we
distinction.
can, right, and if we can just clean off the exterior, then we get all shiny and stuff, you know, and our heart is transparent, but things happen, but we got to clean off our heart first, you know, and it takes a lot of work sometimes. And, you know, and I think the value that we have together, you know, you, I, people that are doing this work of carrying the beautiful message of our true identity, you know, to the world. We're helping people realize that their inner glow, if you will. And you mentioned a fellow that wrote a book earlier whose name basically is, as I understand it, means light. Lucian?
Lucy Ron.
Lucy
Luss.
Lon. Yeah, yeah.
Lucy Ron.
Oh, okay.
Lucy
So,
RAN. Yeah.
okay. Well, the Lucy part, Lucy is short for light.
Okay.
Now, and you know, like like Lucifer. A lot of people say something about Lucifer and being so bad, but really his original meaning was just the light bearer, the light bringer, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm not satanic or anything, and I'm not judging anyone who is. That's their journey to figure out. But as long as we're not forcing anyone to do anything, I'm good, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, but you know, I know I'm getting away from docking at the mothership in a way, notes on going home. I'd like to spend some time on your book just a little bit here, so you can you know, try to remove the delusion of rational thinking, which is every work that you've done does that. And now we're seeing the book backwards, so I should reverse my screen if I can. Well, anyway, I know what I'll do. I'll just do this. Okay, docking at the mothership, notes on going home. Why did you write this book, my friend?
It's sort of rolled, all the books I've written just have come in various strange and different, you know, different ways. And the book that I was really known for, I published it in 2007 called Time of the Vulture, and it was on economics. All right, and in that book in 2007, I had heard these words when I was in prison about, and these were the words. I mean, 1991, Timothy. I'm sitting there last year of a 10-year prison sentence. And I'm in Lompoc Federal Prison. And these words come out of the, quote, blue, the proverbial blue. In times of expansion, it is to the hare the prize goes. Quick, risk-taking, and bold, his qualities are exactly suited to the times. In times of contraction, however, the tortoise is favored. Quick only to retract his vulnerable head and neck, his is the wisest bet when the slow and sure is preferable to the quick and easy. There comes a time, however, when neither the tortoise nor the hare is the victor. This is the time of the vulture. And the vulture feeds neither upon the stored up wealth of the bear or the pastures of the bull, which lie buried deep beneath the rubble of economic collapse. The vulture feeds upon the blind denial and ignorance of the ostrich. The time of the vulture is at hand. 1991, in the most unusual of circumstances, those words came to me. I mean, I wrote them down, right?
Wow.
And I mean, they just came. I had never taken an econ course in my life. My degree at University of California at Davis in '66 was in political science. So I understood power. But I'd never taken one econ course, never really interested in me. But those words, bang, it was destiny. After I got out, I started just on the web, just reading everything I could in about the Great Depression, you know, things like that resonated with it. And I was just led on this journey. And in 2007, 2004, my friend from law school, Marshall Thurber, who's probably best known as being now the father of Ross and Marshall Thurber, the Hollywood producer, a director who did, We're the Millers and Dodgeball and later movies, CIA. Ross is his kid. I've known Marshall since the 60s in San Francisco. And Marshall put together a very interesting group of people called the Positive Deviant Network. And it was said it was a group of people who he's called positive deviants, people who deviated, but in a positive way, but from the norm. And he asked Martha and I to join. So we joined this very interesting group of people. And one of them was a guy in his mid-30s. And this is 2004. His name was John Body. And John, I knew he had been in finance. What I didn't know was how high in finance he had actually been. He was rather young. He was already retired. He had run a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund in London for Credit Lyonnais, this huge French bank. And it was a private hedge fund. And he had huge returns. Okay. And Marshall said John was worried about the economy. And I thought, he's not worried about like I am because of all the work I had done after hearing those words. But so I wanted to present my views to John, but because I knew he knew so much, I couldn't just go, hey, John's going to hell in a handbasket. What do you think? So I started writing, and it turned out to be a 148-page paper that I presented at the PDN. Okay, this Positive Deviant Network of like-minded souls. We got together 4 times a year. And in March 2007, I presented this paper to this group. And I predicted a cataclysmic economic collapse based on rising interest rates, a subprime bubble, gold, everything. I had figured out a whole lot by then. And the truth is, most of those people in the room got really uptight. They were rich. They may have been positive deviants, but most of those, the dues were $5,000 a year. That's just to meet 4 times a year. What the hell? That's more than walking around money.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I gave this talk and said, we're going down the shitter, but I framed it in a way. I said, this is part of a bigger shift. This is part of a changing of worlds, and a better world is going to come from this. But they heard mainly, we're going to hell in a handbasket. All right. Well, I put it up I put this book on the web. You can find the original, sort of the original website at, it's called www.survivethecrisis.com. It talks about my book. And within 2 months, the website was accessed by 10,000 viewers from 125 countries. Wow. I was writing articles. My articles were picked up by gold and silver websites all around the world. And that's where Jeffrey found me later. I mean,
Jeffrey
Mishlove.
Yeah. Well, I knew who you meant, but I want to make sure his name was mentioned.
Yeah, I mentioned, I had met Jeffrey in 1971 at Berkeley when I had a hippie restaurant, that's Chinese natural food restaurant. 1971. Wow. I'd gotten out of jail in 69 for selling LSD. My friend Marshall from law school asked me what I wanted to do. He had just graduated, and I said Chinese restaurant. So we ended up with this Chinese restaurant in Berkeley. The average level of education in our restaurant, Timothy, was 1 year of graduate school. And we had high school dropouts working, and it didn't matter, and I mean, one of my friends was a veterinarian, and she was a waitress there. We're hippies. We're crazy. Jeffrey walked in there in 1971, and we became friends. All right. And you ended up listening to Jeffrey in Missouri State Prison on your TV in the 90s with his program Thinking Aloud. All right.
Yeah, it was a break from so-called reality. I really enjoyed his work.
Which is amazing. I told Jeffrey about you.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yeah, I said, there's this guy who listened to you, Jeffrey, in the mid-90s in prison. Your program Thinking Aloud. All right. So, what happened is after I got out of prison, this is why this is another book. It never really sold it, but I had a vision in my head. It just came to me, 1994. And the vision, Timothy, was this guy, stoned on acid, is sweeping the floor in front of a caged monkey. All right. And he's on acid. It's in a biological sciences lab and he's dropped acid. This just came to me out of the blue. All right. And these are the words. And as I stood there tripping, looking at the monkey, I heard those words that are as clear today as they were then. Who do you think you are anyhow? At least I know I'm in a cage. All right. Those words came in my head in 1994. And I wrote them down. What strange words there were. And my next thought was, God, what is this? I hope it's not a book. All right. Because I had never written a book. Books seemed to be very long, tedious things. And I had so much on my plate. Writing a book wasn't one of them. Well, a book came out. 32 chapters, five, same length, just started plopping out of my head. I'd sit down, I'd write, done. Boom. A few days later, another one came. And at the end, this book came out. So when I wrote my book, the book got written, I called him Jeffrey because Jeffrey was happening. He had a TV program. He was big time. His book is sold, you know. And so I asked him for help. And Jeffrey goes, he said, listen, he said, I don't read fiction. All right. So I understood. So that went nowhere. And that was 1994. And I didn't see Jeffrey after that for 20 years. Okay. But 14 years later, I get an email from him. And this is after I've written my book, Time of the Vulture. And I've got a reputation on the web on economics and money and gold. And I get an email from Jeffrey in 2007. The last time I'd seen it was in 1994. And Jeffrey goes, Darryl, I've been subscribing to Richard Russell's Dow theory letter for years. Now, Richard Russell was a very known theorist on the stock market, the Dow. And he said, I've been subscribing to him for years. He just quoted somebody named Darryl Schoon on money. Is this you? And he couldn't believe it in finding me as an expert on money. Well, I was by that time. And so the thing was, that was this book, it sold. I mean, it was bought in 25 countries. All right. And other books have come through since then for various reasons. But this book, Timothy, Documented the Mothership, sort of erupted last year at this time. All right. The title came to me, Document the Mothership. Now, I made my reputation of money. And I could explain what was going on about the crisis, why it happened, money, nature, bubble markets, in a way that people could understand. All right. But my following, the people, and I had a website, and it was access. I had people in Europe, South America. It was, you get the little blips, you show where people are from. I mean, I think at one point the demographics were, the average viewer on my thing was, they made over 100,000 a year and they had a postgraduate degree. All right. I had a reputation of it. Well, most of those people were hard money people, finance. They weren't into metaphysics. All right. They weren't into spiritual, some of them were, but most of them weren't. All right. But the context of my life has always been spiritual. Ever since I dropped acid and got the breaking of my world open that you got in prison in your dark night of the soul, my transition there was a little easier. The first time I just took a hit of acid. Holy smokes. All right. The walls fell open.
You were talking about the monkey earlier, and I had found this piece of art, and I thought that's why I popped that up there. Yeah, and he's actually got a mushroom in front of him, and it's opening his third eye, and then comes the evolution. So I don't know it. Yeah.
Well, that's almost like me. The acid, the evolution. my
Mhm.
third eye,
Mhm.
in the opening. Well, so what happened is
Oh,
that,
happy birthday, by the way.
ah,
Yeah, happy solar return today.
it's been quite a slog. It's getting better. It's
Mhm.
getting a lot better. And so what happened is that it was, in fact, after I sort of got known, in 2010, for the next 15 years, Martha and I, our life we'd be swinging between these two polarities. I gave talks in Europe, Australia on what I saw going on economically. The audiences were, by the majority, 95% male. All right. And that's what they were. Only guys, hard money, Austrian economics, finance people, worried about the system, which we now see unraveling in front of us. All right. They saw it, and I saw it a long time ago. We're just reaching the culmination of the unraveling now. And other times, Martha and I would be at spiritual events. Oh, money, pot meal, 90% women. Right? So we'd swing. Who had no interest in money? Just like the other group had basically no interest in spirituality. And we'd swing between these two groups. We were in both of them. And with me, spirituality, metaphysics, always was the context of everything I did, including my study of money. I mean, Buckminster Fuller, an incredible metaphysician, in 1981, in his book Critical Path, predicted the crisis we're in now. He said, then humanity is entering an unprecedented crisis intended by the universe to transform fragmented, fighting, competitive mankind into an interharmonious, cooperative whole with a higher standard of living for all. I saw that. I believe that to be the context of the economic crisis, as of the natural crisis, all these crises. But of course, my audience didn't want to hear that. They just wanted to go to gold and silver, say their ass, most of them. But I always had this other context. So I spent the next few years alluding to it and losing most of my follow. People have been reading me. To them, oh, God, I really like what Darryl was saying, but he seems to be getting a little too out there. Must be taking drugs. They had no idea I started taking drugs 40 years before I started thinking about money. Way before. Well, what happened with Talking to the Mothership, it started out to be basically a metaphysical book on notes on going home. It really is. To me, Timothy, what we share,
that makes sense.
Whether we share, whether we know it or not, we're all going home. We all know we're not home. And if you think this home, you're really in trouble. But those who know that this isn't home in a very deep sense are sharing that journey consciously, going home. And that's what it started out to be. So it started out to be metaphysical thoughts that I had, when I was, meditating, prison, things like that. And it turned into one of the channeled writings that I followed for a few years. It started the channeling started in 2011. And they were from through a person who called herself Aisha North. All right. And she had a website called, I think it just was Aisha North. And she started channeling all this information coming through her, and incredibly high quality. All right. Well, one of the channelings when I was doing research for my book, Talking to the Mothership, talked about the economic collapse. And what it said was this. It absolutely reflected what because this is from my book. One of the things I wrote in my book was from Carlos Castaneda's conversations with Don Juan, the Yaqui shaman, the man of power. All right. And,
I've read all of his. I
read
think
all of
all
his-
of his books. I might
Okay.
have missed one or something.
Yes.
Anyway,
And in one of the conversations, he was talking with Don Juan, and Don Juan said, you know, the men of power, the sorcerers, knew that at one time man was a magical being with immense powers. And then something changed. And now he's a sedated creature, a shadow of what he once was. And he
kind of
said,
domesticated. Yeah.
yeah, domesticated. And he said, this happened, and they figured out that we were the victims of predators that have taken us over, which is like the Matrix, okay? And Carlos Castaneda, all right, goes, well, what do you mean? How do they do this? Do they whisper in our ear at sleep at night? And Don Juan said, oh, no, they're far more clever than that. They infected us with their fear. Our mankind is not naturally a petty, covetous, and greedy human being. But fearful, we become that. And that's what we are today.
Interesting. Yeah. They
They
keep
live off-
feeding us fear. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think there's a actual literal spiritual eating of our fear. You know, it's like vampires or something, you know, just metaphorically. And they actually can thrive off of it. And if you can bring yourself in that peaceful place, they can't use your fuel.
Well, see, that's what Don Juan said. He said they live off of us.
Mhm.
They basically do this and lived off of us. All right. And in fact, it's curious about what you said, because his two palliatives for the fear was silence. Silence, because then you don't go into the fear. I mean, to me, our minds, our consciousness, Timothy, it's like they're like computers, but we've been infected with a virus. So every time you boot up your operating system, the fear comes up with it, and it's embedded in there. So you don't even know it's there. You just think, well, I'm seeing reality, but you're not. You're getting a feed that's been infected by a virus in your operating system that's fearful, absolutely fearful. All right. So basically, Don Juan told him, go into the silence. You know what I mean? Don't boot your goddamn computer up. Stay in the silence. And the other thing was laughter. He said, laugh. That's one of the two things that he gave, the advice that he gave to Carlos. Now, what happened is I was looking for that reference in Aisha North's channeling, because they also said that we were the victims of an extraterrestrial consciousness that is descended on Earth that enslaved us. And now that are being kicked out. And I knew she had talked about this. So I was looking for her channelings for a specific validation of that, and I never found it. It's 500 pages, that she downloaded called the Manuscript of Survival. It's wonderful. The Manuscript of Survival. And they describe themselves as our brothers and sisters from another, system that are here to help us transit these times. And in the first channeling, it said, we know that many of you are worried about your planet Earth. It's survival. It's well-being. It says, don't worry about it. It's going to do quite well. It was built to survive. You, however, should worry about yourself. Unless you change, you're not going to be here very much longer. Boom. Then came the channelings. All right. Over 4 years. And so I'm looking through all this Manuscript of Survival for that one thing we talked about from the extraterrestrials, and I never found it. But what I did find was when they talked about the collapse of a financial system. He said, that financial system that you have is a trap. And he says, it's going to go. And he says, now it's the fact that you know it's going to go is going to scare you, because you can't even think of a reality absent of what you're living in. It's all based on fear. And the idea that even it's going to go away makes you fearful. He says, don't worry. You're going to be a whole lot better when it's gone than when it's here. So that formed the context. And when I saw that in her writings, that allowed me to go back to these articles I'd written over the past 15 years that describe our present financial system. I mean, I don't know if you remember from the book, a cartoon I had, and it shows a picture of a drawing of a bank, and the title is "First Bend Over and Trust Bank."
Mm-hmm.
That's my attitude. And now, what I knew, because we are headed for the absolute disintegration of that system of credit and debt that has enslaved us for the past 300 years, but I see it in a positive light. Oh, there it is. Oh,
Well,
there's
it's
an
not
elephant.
the one, but it's
My
just one
cartoon.
of the examples. Yeah.
That's one of my other cartoon, the elephant.
Mhm.
And my thought in your metaphor, Timothy, is that the economic system is like the dark crust over our heart, over us. And what the next few years are going to do, it's going to remove the crust. But and I said, just like in 2007, nobody expected an economic crisis of the magnitude that I was predicting. It happened 1.5 years later. It started in 2008, but nobody expected it. Well, this is what, 15 years later? And let me tell you something, Timothy, everybody expects it now. We all know it's going to go to hell in a handbasket. What they don't expect is that it's going to lead to a better world. That's the difference.
I've had
That's why my
three
book is there.
visions. I had 3 visions about the white buffalo, and the dreams were identical with one exception in each dream. And earlier when I was talking about your role, my role, our role, and helping people discover their real self and bringing peace, that I was actually referring back to that vision that I had of the white buffaloes. And just to very briefly touch on it, because I'd rather spend time on your story here. But one white buffalo I saw over the water, which was like Gitchagumi, so Lake Superior, and toward the end of this dream, if you will, vision, there was this storm that came, and it was like a white storm that was like I call it the white hole. It's like a black hole, but a white hole.
Yeah, well, a white hole. Okay.
Yeah. And it was circling, and it was drawing people off of the face of the earth, and they were all terrified and screaming for their lives, and they were just getting sucked up into this vortex. And I started to get afraid myself, like it was going to take me too. And this white mist was everywhere, and it was coating everything. And I started to run, and then I controlled my fear, and I got up by the structure, and I got in the corner to where I was safe, safe enough, and it didn't draw me up, and I could see these people all going up into the sky, being drawn into the thing. And so one white buffalo, it preceded all this. And then, there was people going in 2s and 3s across the whole earth, bringing out a message of peace to everybody. And most people were like not really getting that, but we were sent. We knew who we were going to. It's like we didn't know it necessarily consciously, but we were going in the right way. Our spirit always knows where we're going, even if our physical body doesn't. And then another white buffalo dream was where the buffalo was in the forest, and I could see it through that. And then the other one was one was over the water, one was in the water, one was up in the sky, and the other was in the forest. So I had the earth, the elements of the earth, the water, and the sky, but I've not had the fourth one of the fire. If there's going to be one, I don't know. It's been some years since I had these dreams, but boy, when you have a dream like that, you definitely remember it. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, why is this white guy having a white buffalo dream? And then when I did my DNA, I found out, in ancestry that I do have some native stuff, but to me, it's a spiritual thing. It's not a biological thing.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah,
we're
it is.
we're all the same family.
Yeah,
When you get
we are.
down to our origins, we're all the same family.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not sure why I brought this up because I long-winded myself out of context. So you were saying something.
The image of the black covering of the heart that broke through, I believe the metaphor in what I've written in this book is that our consciousness as humanity is going to be uncovered through the crises. Now, as human beings, we hate crises. We hate pressure. We hate suffering, and we hate pain. But for this present era of development, it appears that's how we learn. Okay? In fact, I was sitting there in Marin County at one time with a whole lot of money. All right. I mean, I was sitting in a place that I was paying $5,000 a month for almost in the early 80s. And I'm reading a book on metaphysics, and it says, because I was into affirmations and they worked. I was flat broke before I started doing it. I started doing it, it just came. I mean, it basically just piled up, literally. And then I let go of them and I lost everything because I thought I needed to trust more, and affirmations were getting in the way of my trust. I had to just let go. But when I let go, I found I had no trust. I had fear, and everything went away. Ran into another metaphysical book that's explained everything in a way that I could say, oh, I could do it again with a spiritual basis. And I did. And the money came back. Not in the amount that had been there before, but it certainly, it was, I was living good at one level. And I'm reading this book, 1982, and it said, your use of thought to create reality, which is affirmations, goals, is an inappropriate use of this power at this time. Because at this time, much of what you learn comes through adversity. And you are using this power to keep these situations away from you that you need to learn. Wow. All right.
Adversity has been one of my favorite. It's like I'm not just hoping that bad things will happen, but on the other hand, I know there's no such thing as a bad thing. So
Exactly.
there's that. But and at the end of these dreams of the white buffalo, which of course I brought it up because of the fear context that you're really diving into right now, is after everyone got drawn off of the earth and it calmed down and the white hole disappeared, I looked at my body and was completely caked with this white stuff. And I sensed that it was the same white covering spiritually, not the physical stuff, but the spiritual stuff that the Aborigines of Australia have. And that's what I felt like. That's what I looked like. And it was covered. I was just covered everywhere with this white mist. But the earth was peaceful now. The storm was gone, and people were calling to each other for people that were no longer there. Probably I could hear them saying, calling for their loved ones. But the end product was that there was a great peace on the earth. So, but first the storm, and then the peace.
The peace. And that's what it is. I said, the difference between the book I wrote, Time of the Vulture in 2007, and Docking to the Mothership, which is 2022, is that the context of the times when I wrote Time of the Vulture was that nobody believed an economic crisis was imminent. And it was. This time, everybody believes basically an economic crisis is imminent, but they don't think it's going to turn out well. And I do. So it's basically running contrary to the prevailing thought patterns of the time, just like my book in 2007 did. And that's why I think people are going to have a difficult time with it until it really starts happening.
I want to ask you about one chapter, just a little bit, only because it's contemporary. It's on almost everybody's mind. And, it's the chapter on Ukraine, Russia, and war and gold, And but can you give us a little bit of insight on that chapter?
Yes, it's very why it's included. I ran into that uh, last year, okay, because they only invaded Ukraine, I think, in March, right? And when I read about it, I started thinking, there's a psychic called Baba Vanga. I don't know if you've ever heard of her.
I have, but it's just real vague. I think Carolyn
Okay.
Mace might have mentioned her in one of her speeches. Anyway,
Okay.
yeah.
Baba Vanga. She was known as the blind prophet in Bulgaria. Okay. And she certainly had the gift. I mean, Marshall Thurber, my friend from law school, when he was doing, he had a super learning techniques. One of the people that he got a technique from was a guy named Gregory Lozanov, who was also into super learning in Bulgaria. And Lozanov said, you're able to absorb much more information when there's a background music going on. So at all of Marshall's Positive Deviant seminars, there'd be music in the background. Okay. Marshall went out and brought Lozanov to the United States. All right. Lozanov, this is back in the 70s. And Bulgaria was a communist country. What I found out later was that they tattooed him. All right. And they wanted to make sure they had their finger on it. He's leaving Bulgaria. And they forbid him from leaving the country again, because they figured if somebody in the West thought this motherfucker was so important, they were going to make sure he never got out again. Wow. All right. But what happened is one of Marshall's partners, I found out, helped him escape later. Okay.
Wow, okay.
And that's Gregory Lozanov. As a cross reference, in front of Baba Vanga's house, because she died, there's a little memorial plaque, and it's by Professor Gregory Lozanov. Gregory Lozanov. He had done a study of Baba Vanga, and he sent letters to all the people who had readings from her and asked if her readings were accurate. And they turned out to be 85% accurate. Okay?
That's pretty good odds these days.
That's pretty good odds.
Yep.
Yeah. In fact, so I began to wonder, and I was familiar with her. I've done a lot of reading in this area. And I thought, because I thought maybe she said that about World War III. So I Googled up again, and she had made some remarks, in fact, about Putin. Okay. But nothing that I could stick my finger on. Who I found in relationship to the psychic prediction of World War III is a gentleman named Alois Erlenmeyer. Erlenmeyer. I don't know how to pronounce it right. He was in Germany. He was also had the gift of psychic prediction. All right. And in the late 1940s, he had these visions. And the visions were of the Russians suddenly moving so fast through Ukraine into Western Europe towards Germany, catching everybody off guard. And then he saw all these birds dropping dust, and then death, and then peace. And what he was told was the vision. He was told that the Russians were going to come. They were just going to go and their intent to wipe out Germany. They're going after Germany. They crossed it. They came through two ways. And he said, but suddenly, within 90 days, it's over. And what it was surmised later was that the birds might be drones dropping biochemical warfare on the Russian tanks. Moving through, that just dropped into a halt. There'd be a revolution in Russia. Europe would be devastated, part of it. And after this, there'd be peace. And Erlenmeyer said, and people talk to God a whole lot more later afterwards. All right. All right. But it was going to be devastating, that little thing. Now, so I read this. Woo! Pretty intense. All right. And the article, one of the articles that mentioned it said, you know what? Who believes in psychic predictions anyhow? But this thing seems it's unsettling people as the Russians are, gearing up. All right. I mean, this is it. And it said there'd be trouble in the Middle East and set it off, assassination. And so there's all this stuff going on. And already talking about an economic collapse is beyond people's gradient. People go into denial when there's anything they don't want. And if they don't like it, they're going to make up something that tells them what they want is true in terms of crisis. That's why you get so much bullshit on the web now. If reality doesn't suit you, find someone who says it isn't true and something else is. I believe that. That's what people do. These are those kind of times. All right. So I'm reading this and I go, wow. Woo. And I wrote, in fact, I submitted this article to all the sites that were publishing me at the time. None of them published it. It scared us. They didn't want to spread it. They didn't want to say this. All right. No one posted my article. And then I got this little notion because at that time I was putting different articles in the middle of my docking to the mothership, on economics and the ones I'd written. And I had a feeling, I wonder if I should put this in there. And I threw the I Ching, that Chinese book, the Book of Changes, to ask for its guidance. And it said, yes. Now, I believe, Timothy, it said yes for a reason. And the reason is that it's going to happen. And people are going to go back and see that I wrote this in this book before it happened. Much like in 2007, when I presented my paper, Time of the Vulture, to the Positive Deviant Network, I presented that on March 1st, 2007. In May, I began writing articles posted by financial sites on those subjects. One of the articles I wrote was, I made a prediction. And I was talking about the subprime crises. And I said, this summer, as the Golden State Warriors prepare for a title run, and as backyard barbecues are being cleaned off, we are about to have an economic crisis. Subprime investments are going to collapse. And I wrote that in May. In the first week of July, 2 Bear Stearns hedge funds, each worth $1 billion, went to zero. Went to zero. And 2 weeks after that, my article was posted in a Singapore real estate blog and referred to my prediction.
Wow. Okay.
Now, I believe that it's going to come to pass, just like most people did not believe. It's really funny. My book, Time of the Vulture, we put it on the web for $100. We got this thing said, money back guarantee, $100. We got this pitch, how to do it. We sold 950 copies. And from the PDF was 80, the hardback was 100, the investment module was 130. We sold on 950 copies, and then the collapse happened, and we got no more orders. Okay? Because what I predicted happened. I think, and that at that time, nobody believed what I was predicting. Okay? This time, everybody knows about the crisis that I'm covering, but nobody believes it's going to turn out the best. I believe when it starts happening, that's when people are going to start reading this book. Because they want to believe something better is going to happen. Now, they still want the old world to maintain itself. When the old world starts falling away, that's when they're going to start looking, well, maybe there's a better way. But that's just a personal opinion.
Yeah, I was trying to find a picture of your Day of the Vulture here so I could show people. I just don't know if it's going to translate into a sizable picture that I can actually use. But anyway, I'll make sure that people get a copy of your all your written material sources and the like. So anyway, so I was looking at your chart today, your astrological chart,
Yeah.
and it was really interesting, because today's your literal solar return, 13 degrees Aquarius. And something I never noticed before is that you have Venus in Aries, and I don't know why I never connected the dot before. I mean, just doing it automatically, looking at the interpretations and but I didn't connect the dots that I also have Venus in Aries. You have Venus in Aries at 0 degrees. Guess what degree my Venus in Aries is?
What?
0 degrees.
0 degree.
So we both I just find that very interesting, and I've had some, there was a fellow that did a reading for me some years back and talked about Venus and Aries in such a way. It's like, oh my gosh, I'd just rather that you didn't have that knowledge. It's like, oh, he just pulled the covers back big time, but that's always been a really good thing for me anytime someone does that,
Sure.
and but we have some alignments between your chart and mine, and you're pretty much an open book, man. You're willing to talk to anyone, and you're going where the spirit leads you. And I have a moon in Aquarius, you have sun in Aquarius, and my moon conjuncts your sun in a wide, it's a bit of a wide girth, but it's still a conjunction. I have 9.5 degrees, you have 13, and when you have the sun or the moon, they're both have wider girths of orb, they call it in astrology. How your sun has the widest orb and the moon is pretty close. Those are the two big. Yeah, the three big things are sun, moon, ascendant, but sun is the biggest as far as the radius of the orb. The moon is next. And so you get anywhere between 5 and 7 for those planets, then they're considered conjunct, and it's like just a general thing. It's not trying to make it about me. I have a stellium, which means you have three planets. I have a stellium in the 3rd house, but I have the sun right in between Mercury and Venus, right? And the sun in between will draw the 2 planets on each side within its orb, which makes it a stellium, which means the 3 things are conjunct. And if there would have been an inner planet in the center instead of the sun, it would have been more difficult to call that a stellium. Or if the moon was right in between the 2, then you still would, but you have other planets, and it's not quite strong enough. Jupiter might. And I'm kind of going on and on here, but I'm seeing some synergy between your chart, your natal chart, and my natal chart. But then when I looked at today's chart, you have some serious alignments going on here, and the at 3:30, there's so much above the horizon. In the 10th house, you had a lot of activity in the 10th house, which is about reaching the public, reaching the average public member of the public. Well, I'm hoping that this will open some doors and help make your, bring more attention to your book, and more importantly, the information that's in the book. To me, economics are about the struggle for spirituality and nothing more. And until we look at everything from the center, that's why I like the title Mothership. The mothership is the internal, the fathership is the external, and both are, both pulled together into a conjunction. There's balance, right? But where there's way too many of us that are putting separation consciousness into play, like there's a difference between male and female that is erroneously posited politically to keep people at each other's throats and angry at each other and fearful of each other. And, but when we get into the divine feminine and the divine masculine, everything falls back into place, and there is a divine economy as well. There's a divinity involved in everything we do, no matter what it is. Even when we're being really abused and hurt by people, eventually when we put on the lens, hopefully put on the lens of the spirit, we will see these things in such a way that it beautifies our entire existence that we would not have had happen had it not been for
that.
the abuse,
Yeah.
Whatever we can call it. And that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people.
Of course it is.
But there's not a thing that has happened in my life that hasn't brought more beauty into my life rather than pain. Beauty from ashes, some people call it. And the phoenix, you have no phoenix without the trial by fire, and rising, the phoenix rising. And sorry to pull away from the the foundation of maybe where you're going with in your communications here. And maybe I shouldn't apologize for anything.
No, yeah. No, Timothy, it aligns with what I'm saying. And I know that, for example, it's what I'm saying and I've written is really a hard pill for most people to swallow for a number of reasons. One, because I brought together two subjects that are basically don't seem to share much of anything up to the common reader. And the other thing, nobody likes to hear about disaster or big change. And I remember at the end of my first interview with Regina, she looked at me and she goes, Darryl, what could you, what would you want to tell people here after I've just
right.
Like, are you gonna leave?
Yeah, I saw that episode. Yeah. I saw both of them. Yeah.
And I looked at her, and what came out of my mouth was something that came to me when I was in prison, when I was meditating at that time. And these words were this: we are eternal lights passing through temporal darkness. We cannot be harmed. We are love itself. Amen.
I love that. Every time you say it, it's like a fresh breath of fresh air. It's like whoosh.
Yes. And that's what it is. And, when you were talking about the differences and the conflicts that are going on that are magnified by the present day, they're all coming to a head. They're all becoming obvious. They were always there. No one wanted to talk about them. No one wanted to acknowledge them. We wanted to get by, just get by. And then now you can't get by because they're in the way. And my sense, Timothy, is this, because you were talking about it, the necessity to bring these two things together. The fire that you have not seen yet in your vision of the white buffalo is what's going to meld the two apparently polarized opposites. They are one. But until this advent of the new age, they've been imbalanced. And I wrote about that in my first book, Time of the Vulture, the imbalance. And I said, what we are going through is a rebalancing of universal polarities. This is a universal paradigm shift. And the longer a paradigm has been in existence, and the deeper its roots are, the more fundamental and chaotic the transition will be. But the truth is, we have been satisfied with survival because even that doesn't appear to be a given in a temporal reality. All right? And what will happen as a result of what we've been trying to resist for eons is going to show us the eternal life that's always been ours. But until we see it, until this event happens, we're going to continue to live in isolation, separation, fear, and struggle to a greater or lesser degree. And we've all been satisfied with having a lesser degree, as long as they're ambulatory. Because we can look at those other people and go, thank God I'm not like them. It could be that way. Okay? But the truth is, this is going to be true for everybody. on this plane because we came from the same source. And the source is used the dissonances and the problems and suffering as learning tools for a while. And I think on this plane, the time for that is over. We've had our fill of suffering. We've had more than our fill of suffering. And in fact, one of the channel books I read, God, source said, you've had more than enough time to learn what you're supposed to learn through experience. I am now intervening. Hey, if there was a need for intervention, I think we could all agree on it.
Yeah, I think most of the interventions that I've had, I mean, at some point I just realized that the police were my personal intervention teams. You know? Because if they wouldn't have arrested me, I'd have probably died of drinking, you know, or I'd have drugged myself out. I mean, I couldn't deal LSD because I was taking it all. So, you know, and that's not wise. That's not a wise use of. So, and my astrology business is LSD astrology, which has nothing to do with the drug. It's light shining in darkness astrology.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, right. So
what a great use of that acronym.
Yeah, right.
That's
so
wonderful.
It's, and
Light
people, they see
shining
the
in darkness.
LSD, they go, yeah, and
yeah,
yeah, you're all about the light shining in darkness, you know. And it's like Kid Rock saying in a song that I can't pronounce the title of about a something or other. He says, "Get in the pit and try to love someone," you know. And that was such a good saying. It became part of my paradigm as well, you know. Give us some of your favorite quotes. I mean, you're a quote master, you know. What have been some of your guiding light quotes?
There was a in 1969, I'm in the Haight-Ashbury with my first wife. Okay, being married in the Haight-Ashbury was almost an oxymoron. And we're coming down off of acid. Okay, and these words came through her, and these were the words: "You can never have it the way you want it," which is not to say it cannot be exactly as you want it. Only you can never own it, for it is only lent and must be renewed with thanks at every moment.
Oh, that's good. Renewed with thanks. That's great. Take it to the bank.
Yeah. And another time, in other words, it came through once, 1982. And I'm talking to a guy in Rome. And that morning I had been at the forum, you know, the old forum where Julius Caesar was stabbed. So it's all ruins. And I'm looking at it, and I'm not getting it, Timothy. All right. Now, I appreciate art now. In my lesser evolved states, I didn't appreciate anything like that. Okay. I can see it now. I can feel things that I didn't see or feel then. So I'm looking around at these ruins thinking, knowing I just ain't getting it. I know I'm in the midst of this historical place of immense significance. And I'm just not, you know, I could be in a death, you know, anywhere, and it wouldn't have been any different. I'm not feeling anything. A thought comes to me, maybe some acid would help. All right. And I hadn't taken acid in 10 years. Long time. This is 82. And it just so happened I had some on me, being who I am. And I took it, and boom, there I am, out there. Now, I don't remember much about the forum, you know, or anything like that. But I do remember that evening, we're at this guy's house that I'd met on the plane, rather extraordinary person. And I'm talking to him, and we'd only met that one time, and he, on the plane coming over to Italy. And his name was Andrea Franchetti. And I said, Andrea, I'm the luckiest person I know. And my life hasn't been easy. And he said, what is luck? And these words came out of my mouth. Luck is love's reflection shining on your path.
Yeah, I read that in your prison book. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And that's one for the bank.
Mm-hmm.
That's
the one I'd show that one.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. LSD astrology.
Mm-hmm.
There's a museum in San Francisco, and it has a thing that I created. It's a blotter, and it ended up in an acid museum in San Francisco, and it's a blotter. On the picture is the picture of Albert Hoffman, the Swiss chemist.
Hoffman?
Albert,
oh, yeah, the inventor of
the inventor of LSD.
Yeah,
the Swiss chemist.
Mm-hmm.
And it had a picture of him with a test tube, and the blotter says Dr. Albert Hoffman, father of LSD, 100% pure. And they were made in sheets to resemble stamps.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's all the same,
mm-hmm.
the same light in various forms, breaking through the darkness at the times in which we chose to incarnate. It's at this, I'm 78 now. And I was lucky enough to be there in the 60s. It was destined. It was absolutely destined, for my life to be there at that time and to experience all those things that happened. And I was because I tend to be rigid for a number of reasons. I could justify it genetically, astrologically. It took LSD, it took very extreme things to move me. Very extreme things to move me. Events, phenomena, and they happen. And my gratitude is that I'm grateful for the things that made it happen on the front end that I wouldn't have been. At a certain point, I was very angry that these things were happening because they were unpleasant. They were difficult and they were hard. And it was only in retrospect where I realized the part they played in my life. Because the light that has been shining in my path has been shining ever since I was born, when I was, quote unquote, unlucky, when my life was really difficult, when I saw no way out. And I realized in retrospect, when I saw no way out, it wasn't that there wasn't a way out. It was that I couldn't see a way out. And I was not meant to see a way out until a way out came. That the constrictions in my life were meant. When I was younger, the words fate, I always hated it because they implied a destiny you weren't in control of, which I still believe is true. But the reason why I didn't like it, I realized I didn't believe a destiny as magnificent as the one I believe now is going to happen. Now I'm all for fate. Then my vision was limited by what I had experienced, which was generally pretty negative, because as I looked around, all I saw was a reflection of negativity. And I had reached certain conclusions, like I say, that if they were true, a saying I have, Haight-Ashbury, if this were true, we'd all be up shit creek.
Ain't that the truth?
1966, 1967. That came right out of the hate.
Destiny is swimming in the ocean of choice. It's ever fluid. We choose our destiny, but it's fluid.
But it's fluid.
For whatever that's worth. That's the words that came to mind.
Well, it's like that's the dichotomy, the apparent paradox between determinism and free will, which Leibniz addressed with the statement, if I have free will, it was determined that I have it.
Condemned to be free, Sartre.
Well, you know, it was Sartre and French existentialism was the devolution of the rational mind at that time,
Mhm.
where all they saw was mind. And the French loved to think anyway. That's why French
Overthink.
overthink. That's why French Revolution, French existentialism was so
Mhm, mhm.
that way. But even among them, for example, Camus was an existentialist,
I love
and he
that
found
guy.
his heart. He
Mhm.
found his heart. When I read an existentialism, the ones I related to were like Miguel de Unamuno, who was a Spanish Catholic existentialist, who prided himself on teaching at a university of ignorance, a bastion of ignorance in the West, because he held to certain beliefs. Or Martin Buber, the Jewish existentialist.
No, I'm not familiar with that one. Huh.
Yeah. And these are with just like within religion, you find those in the dark light carrying on as if they're light.
Mhm, mhm.
In existentialism, which I call a disease of the Western mind, there were those who had the light in them on that search. There were those. And so it's always a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But the only thing that really concerns us is the thing that's going on in us. The only thing that really has concerned people when they read my book is what it's going to do to them. I have no
Mhm,
idea.
mhm.
Like you have no idea, Timothy, when you say what you say, how it's going to impact people. All you're doing is sharing what you have experienced, seen, felt in the context of passing illusion. So the truth that it contains is, in a sense, perhaps only transient and in that moment for people who are going to hear it. But the truth of our existence is there is going to be somebody who will hear it. And if
Mhm.
not now, tomorrow. And if not tomorrow, the next day. But that day will come. That day will come. When I started my journey, I had no faith at all. No faith. Zero. I was certain this was fun. Now, totally the opposite.
I was just looking for your picture online of the maelstrom, but I couldn't quite find it yet. I didn't want to try and find it last second here, but I wanted to flash that picture up there. But I'll try and put these things down for, like, I'll create a blog on this and cite all the, of course, the docking at the mothership and your other things. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to the recording though, just because I can't wrap my mind around with my memory of all the things that you're citing, you know, and I really enjoy I mean, I've listened to so many of your interviews by a lot of other people, and you're able to draw out this data and these sources and sites. And that's a very useful thing. And I do that to some extent in a different way, I suppose. It's just more for living people for the most part. And I remember when my girlfriend was had one of her good friends over shortly after I first met her. And I wanted to make a good impression, I mean,
Sure.
know,
Yeah.
and in a friendly way, not a manipulative way, but I didn't want her to frown on me
Sure.
as like, oh, this guy sucks,
Yeah. What
It's
are you
like,
doing with him?
how'd you,
I thought
how'd
you
you
learned
pick
your
this
lesson
guy?
on the last boyfriend.
Yeah. So, ex-convict and,
Yeah.
and but spirit brought us together, and it's a long story too. There's a really powerful spiritual experience we had early on, and I was in a vortex of a spinning purple crystal, and she was doing a singing bowl, and it was just so much that went into it. It started where I just saw this little speck of light, this purple speck, and I was going to look away. And then spirit brought me to look back at it. And as I looked back at it, expanded, got wider and wider. And then it was turning into this spinning vortex of purple all around me. and it was being moved in a circle around me with the singing bowl as she was turning the wand in the singing bowl. And then there was these blue arms that were coming through the vortex, the spinning crystal, and they were almost touching me. They couldn't touch me. Their hands were all over, and it's like, and I started to kind of get scared at first because I've never had anything like this happen before. And I thought, wait, relax. God's got my life. I don't have to worry about anything. God won't allow anything to happen that can't be beautified. And I just trusted it, but it's still, part of it's still a mystery, but that was part of the spiritual experience I had. And her friend is talking about something that just ignited my imagination, and I loved the topic, and I started quoting people on it, so this is where this is going with the quotes.
Yeah.
And I quoted some philosopher, I quoted some person, etc.
Yeah.
And Trisha interrupted me in the middle of a quote.
Yeah.
And she says, "Oh my gosh, have you ever had an original thought in your life?" And I wasn't offended or anything. I just said, well, yeah, occasionally, but when I do, I hold it highly suspect. Because my best thinking landed me in prison a couple of times, and so it's like, yeah. And I love quoting people because it's like spirit gives us exactly what we need at the very moment we need it. So, and you're co-signing that constantly. So, you got any more quotes for us before we wind this thing down?
Let me think. I think it's probably the wrong thing. Let me go. Let me just get quiet. Each one of us is here by our own choice, however improbable that seems. That which gave us choice, that which brought us here, is watching over us and waiting for us when we choose to do what we came to do.
Yes. That's a big yes. All right, my brother. Thank you for being on the Incomplete Skeptic, and blessings on you and Martha and the Temple of Universality and everything you're doing in our lovely planet.
Thank you, Brother Timothy.
Yes, sir. And I look forward. We'll do this again someday, and God willing that we survive another 20 or 30 years. It can happen.
It can happen.
And Venus in the masculine sign of Aries, 0 degrees. Okay, Venus is the feminine, and it's also the brightest planet because it's so reflective, and it's called the basically a star by some people's imagination. The morning star, some people call it, because it's so bright, and it's shining the divine feminine. The Venus is the feminine, and Aries is ruled by Mars, which is the masculine. So we use our masculine energy to bring out the feminine power, and that we have in common. So I'm hoping I'm going to have to put this on LSD Astrology on Facebook just to make sure people get to hear some of this. So, and all right, namaste, my brother.
Namaste, Timothy.